after Atlantic Road, Tempest Two go full time, proper business. You're planning your next adventures. Since then, you've done, correct me if I'm wrong, ultra triathlon through Patagonia. You've taken the bikes. Was it to the Sahara?
Yeah.
To the Sahara. So I mean, them in themselves are again pretty epic. But I'm gonna, if it's all right with you, I'm gonna bypass those two and go to your most recent one of climbing El Cap, because again, correct me if I'm wrong, your kind of criteria for figuring out what the next adventure is basically what have we never ever done in our lives before, and then what can we basically learn to do within 2 years, and then try and do the biggest thing possible within that area. So El Cap was essentially, right, neither of us have ever climbed before in any way, shape or form. What's the sheerest rock face in the world that we could give it a go? Right, El Capitan in California. Okay, let's give ourselves 2 years to do it. And bang, adventure tick, let's get going.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly it. And I think way more so than the Atlantic. Like I said, we're blessed with this naivety in the Atlantic, you know, like it's a really small group of people that have done it, and it's as much about luck in terms of what the ocean throws at you. And we were relatively unlucky, you know, with the capsize, the hurricane, all that stuff. Some people that cross it, you know, they don't get wet, that they get like good weather, and like kind of that's it. And that was awesome to be able to have that experience. Like we said, that was our, I guess, the moment that kind of changed everything for us. But the El Cap, we doubted ourselves thousands of times, because it was so different in the sense that, you know, it didn't require much skill rowing the Atlantic. It required a huge amount of grit, determination, and that side of things. Whereas El Cap, it required a huge amount of skill, and you needed to know everything intricately before you could even leave the ground. And so we didn't have the chance to be blessed with the naivety of not understanding. So it was far scarier for me anyway in the lead up to it. You know, the consequences of something going wrong are far more obvious the entire time. And I think the intensity of it over 3.5 days or whatever it was way higher than the Atlantic. But yeah, that's exactly right. We want to take that steep learning curve, and El Cap, people usually climb for their entire lives before even, you know, trying to approach El Cap, and we know now why that's the case. It's a ridiculous feat, and yeah, I think it was just utterly crazy, and the learning journey was way steeper there than anything else we'd ever done.
So you've applied that methodology to also, you know, before the bike, taking the motorbikes down Sahara. Neither of you had ridden motorbikes before, and same with the triathlon Patagonia. So before El Capitan, you'd had 3 pretty major adventures using that same process of, right, we've never done something, let's learn, but yet still with El Capitan, that's, as you say, it's still the steepest learning curve. So was there anything, Tom, within the previous 3 adventures going through the same kind of or similar process that helped you in the learning process of Capitan, or actually was that so nuanced that, you know, it was a beast unto itself?
I think the obvious one is we looked at El Cap and we thought, you know, let's scope it out, see if it's possible. So we spoke to literally some of the best climbers in the world, saying, listen, we've never climbed in our lives. We want to do El Cap in 18 months. Like, is it doable? And they were like, yeah, we just need to know this, this, and this. Whereas most walk into a climbing gym and speak to climbers about it, everyday climbers, we were literally laughed at. They were like, no chance.
Yeah, you're used to being laughed at by this point.
Yeah, exactly. We were laughing at But, you know, and that for us is like, right, okay, they think it's possible. We'll give it a go. But I think why El Cap was such a different beast to the other ones was the training for the other ones was fine. So for Patagonia, it was like, you know, it was just getting very fit on the bike and running and learning how to paddleboard. For the motorbikes, it was with an instructor, 4 days on a motorbike learning, and then you go. But the training period for El Cap I can safely say I've never ever been so anxious for such a long period of time, because, you know, we'd go climbing in the Peak District, and we knew, because we were trad climbing, for those who don't know, so El Cap is a 3,000 foot vertical granite rock face, but as you're climbing it, you have to place your own protection. It's called trad climbing. So you've got all these basically gadgets on your harness, cams and bits of like metal, which are nuts. And as you're climbing, you're placing it in, attaching the rope. So your safety is in your own hands, essentially. And usually when you climb, you progress, you learn how to climb indoors, then you do a bit of sport climbing where there's bolts in the wall, then you go to trad, but you progress very slowly so you get comfortable. Whereas we were having to get to such a level so quickly that we had no time to really settle into a certain, I guess, grading or kind of ability. So every time we went climbing, we had to climb stuff that was outside of our ability. Yeah. And that's fine when you're running, because you just got to try a bit harder and you might throw up at the end of it. But when you're, 100 foot up a wall and you're knackered and you know if you fall, you're going to fall 30 feet, the fear that gave us was just unbelievable. And like, I've no shame in saying we'd be like going up to the Peak District to go climbing, and it would be raining that morning, so we couldn't go. Be over the moon. Like, I'd be over the moon. It's like, get in there, we don't have to go climbing. And it was just a constant battle of, we need to get better, we need to become more kind of proficient at all this stuff, but by doing that, we've got to break through this fear barrier. And it was such a struggle. And I think that's why, like, climbers, some of these guys and girls, these professional climbers, the way that they rationalize fear and kind of risk versus reward, and the calmness that they bring to incredibly dangerous situations is like nothing we've ever experienced. And that was what El Cap kind of gave us, that we weren't quite expecting. You learn one thing, and then you learn that there's 10 other things to do with that. The roping systems, the knots, if you get wrong, your mate falls and dies. There was so much information that we'd never really had to learn before, that it was such a beast and adventure, honestly.
And it's really interesting, because you'd assume, in terms of when you say, the level of fear and anxiety going into it, if you take the Atlantic at the start and El Cap, the most recent one you've done, you'd almost assume that level would be the other way around. Like, because the Atlantic, your first one, you'd be absolutely bricking it, and then you've done the stuff such as by El Capitan. But as you say, it's just that level, ignorance is bliss, I suppose, type thing with the Atlantic. And so with the learnings from the other ones, and talking to you both about El Capitan, you've been able to put much more of a kind of methodology behind kind of the learning. So whereas the Atlantic was kind of, say, like a sponge, just take it all in with, whereas El Capitan, there's an actual kind of process you figured out in terms of how learn, how best to learn, and how to learn quickly. Because as you say, with climbing, if you don't learn quickly, it's not a case of you make a mistake, it's fine, you can fix it tomorrow. It's potentially a case of it's much more serious than that. So what is that learning process that you kind of discovered?
I think it starts for us in having this deadline. It's something that we talk about, and we essentially believe in it. It's called Parkinson's Law. It's that work fills the time that is given to it. So if we were to give ourselves an 8-year deadline to climb El Cap, it would take 8 years. If we were to give 4 years, and we gave ourselves a little over 18 months, and again, we wanted to prove that that's the case, and that's the case in business as well. You might have a project, a 6 weeks project, and it takes 6 weeks, and you could probably do it in 3 weeks as well. And on both occasions, people are working through the night before to deliver the final piece of work or whatever. And we kind of use adventure to take that thinking into it. And that's why we try and put these limits on these big challenges and push learning. But what El Cap did was, as Tommy alluded to, it wasn't like, right, learn one thing and we get that now. It was like, right, learn one thing, and that actually opens up another 10 different things that could potentially happen. And then once you've learned those 10 things, well, then there's another 10 things of each of them that could potentially happen. So that's what was, I think, making it more stressful as well, as rather than being like, right, I can see my knowledge base is increasing here, which it was. it was also, you start to uncover what you don't know as well. And it's like, you know, the more I know, the more I know that I don't know, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So how do we stop that becoming, because that sounds like quite an overwhelming thing, especially going into something brand new. You go, right, I figured this out. Then all of a sudden it's like, geez, now I've got 10 other things before I can even move on to the next thing. So how do you stop that just like weighing down on you?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think we are quite good at like using each other and having the conversations and chatting through the sort of thing. It makes prioritising and, like we said earlier, like having perspective on the things like a bit easier, and that at least steers in terms of level of importance of like, right, what needs to be learned next. And, you know, a lot of the time it was, what do we need to learn that is going to enable us to take us to that next level. And then some of the times we were learning as we were doing it. So we got to Yosemite for the month before the climb, because part of what, you know, we believe in this Parkinson's law and in learning fast is surrounding yourselves with the right people, but also like creating an environment for learning. And, you know, we live in, you know, new build estates in the middle of England, where there's no big rocks, there's no big multi-day, multi-pitch climbs. So, you know, if you're at the pub or even talking with friends, or even talking to each other, you know, it's not normal to talk about climbing 3,000 feet up El Cap. So we wanted to create an environment where that would feel more normal. So that's why we lived in the valley for the month before the climb, was to actually have conversations with climbers. And you're not talking about, oh my God, you know, you slept at 1,000 feet last night, or you climbed this route. It was like, you're talking more about the intricacies of this climb, and, you know, what the view was like at 1,000 feet. And it just tried to bring a bit more of a sense of normality to it, which was, you know, really, really important for making that learning actually happen. But yeah, I think in terms of just pushing it, like, they're the things I would say is putting a deadline on it, like creating an environment for learning, and then getting not comfortable being uncomfortable, but chasing that uncomfortability. I know Tommy mentioned it earlier, and that's essentially what learning is. I think that's what stalls people's learning in professionally as well, is it's uncomfortable not being right all the time. And the more senior you are, or the more specialist you are at something, the harder it is to learn something totally new, because you ultimately have to be wrong in order to learn. You have to fail in some way and iterate and come back at, you know, a bit better. And that's what the climbing did for that steep learning curve. We were doing every single day.
And again, it's such a valuable lesson, isn't it? Because so much of life, as you say, you see it in any organised sport, business, whatever it might be, where there's this verbal acceptance of, you know, we want to learn, we want to get better. In order to do that, you know, mistakes are going to happen. But then as soon as a mistake happens, someone gets fired, someone loses their job, or they get kind of, the top people come down on them. And so what's said and done is two very different things. And as you said, in order, again, yours is a very extreme example of it, but for any person, organisation, team to progress, is that environment for learning. And you do not learn unless things go wrong. Yeah, that's the greatest learning tool anyone can ever be given, is something going wrong, if it's then used in the right way. So going into that then, so you've done that journey of learning, 18 months. You have the month almost at the face of what you're about to do. And for those of you that don't know what El Capitan is, if you've got an Apple Mac and you see the rock sheer face screensaver, that is El Capitan. That is what these two climb. So when you turn up there, Tommy, and I suppose similar to when you get to Gran Canaria, when you get out of the harbour and turn right, you get there and you see what's in front of you. Was there this feeling of shit? Yeah. that's quite high, or was it like bang up for this?
No, definitely not the latter. It was it was funny. It was this constant physical anxiety that was there. We drove past it every day. We climbed on it. We climbed around it. It was always there, as you know. It was the goalpost essentially. But spending that month in Yosemite, that was the game changer for us, because that was I think we learned more in those few weeks before the climb than we did in the year before.
Wow.
Because when we were training before, and we made so many mistakes in the training, looking back on it, we were training to become good climbers. That was actually the wrong thing to do, because it's an arrogant mindset, really, because to become a good climber, you have to climb for a long time. It's just one of those sports where there's certain parts of it you can't fast track.
Yeah.
And we were climbing in gyms and trying to climb hard routes and outside and everything. And we were trying to fast track becoming experienced, which you just can't do. Whereas actually, when we got to Yosemite, we realized we need to train to get up that. That's all we need to do. That's our goal. Not to become amazing climbers, is to get up that. And most people will look at El Cap and just see it as just a rock face, but actually there are hundreds of routes across it. We were going up the nose, which is the most famous, and it is essentially a dance. There is moves, there is tons and tons of information called topo that gives you every single aspect, every pitch of that climb. So then we started to focus on, right, pitch 6, let's go and practice what we're going to need to do on that today. It's like, right, let's actually go and climb the first 5 pitches so we get kind of accustomed to being at that height and on that route and everything. And when we started training for the route, that's when stuff started to click into place. We're physically okay. We weren't great climbers. We were never going to become great climbers. And it took us a while to realize that actually, let's focus on the things that we need to focus on, and let's let the other stuff slide. And I think that is a really, really valuable way of looking at learning. Is, okay, I can spend ages becoming okay at a broad kind of range of things within a sport or within a kind of industry, or I can say, right, here's 5 things that I want to become really, really, really good at, but it's going to allow me to go and achieve this. And it took us a while to figure that out, but once we did, it kind of changed everything for us.
Yeah. It's like the whole, what's the phrase? Jack of all trades, master of none.
Exactly.
And I suppose it harks back to what you said on one of the learners on the Atlantic training, is actually knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. It's a similar mindset, I suppose, in the sense that, as you say, I suppose like anything in life, you've got this big goal of becoming, take sport. Someone will go into sport and you want to be the best rugby player in the world, like this. And that's quite a big ask. And there's actually very specific stuff that associates with your position or whatever it might be. And actually, that's what's important.
Yeah.
And if you get that bit right, then you can move on. I suppose with the climb, it's very similar. Let's make sure we've nailed pitch 6. Then once we've done that, then we can move on to pitch 7. And it's those, again, going back to the learning process, bit by bit, and the accumulation of all those, I suppose, is the fact that actually you get from the bottom of El Capitan to the top of El Capitan. So you've done all that, and then you start to talk me through the actual climb itself, like the experience of it. Or did anything happen on the climb? Was it smooth? Was it not?
Yeah, it was absolutely mad in the first sense. Without just keeping on saying that, even when I think about it now, it was crazy. But so we left really early first day. We had plans, because we read the topo and we spoke to loads of people. We had a route planned of where we were going to stop. So we planned to do it in 3 days. So everything that begins to then shape how you pack your bag, like where you look at staying on the rock. And that meant that on the first day, our first goal was to get to a place called El Cap Tower, which is 1,000 feet up the wall, I think, 1,100 feet, something like that. And so we have to get up there, and we also have to get our bag up there, which is called the Pig. It weighs about 50 kilos, and it contains everything that we need to live on the wall for 3 days, maybe 3.5 if things go wrong. So that's our toilet, all of our water, our food, our different clothing for whatever weather like El Cap was going to throw at us. And it was just mad. So day one, we left really early with a plan of getting to El Cap Tower by 3 or 4 p.m. And that was based on the speed that we climbed routes around the valley, and the expected speed to get to that place. We didn't end up arriving until like 3 a.m. the following morning. And in hindsight, we should have known that things were going to go wrong. you know, our bag was getting stuck in what seemed like every potential place it could get stuck. It was getting stuck there, in every little crack and under every little ledge. So day one was absolutely carnage. We actually ended up getting to El Cap Tower at 3 a.m. And just as we were faffing about 50 feet below it, trying to unplug our bag, a voice kind of leant over the side of the ledge and said, "What the hell are you guys doing down there?" And it ended up being Alex Honnold and Tommy Caldwell. So for those that don't know, they're essentially they are the two best Yosemite climbers in the world, and two of the top 5 climbers in the world, like hands down. And they were climbing the hardest route ever to be done on El Cap, trying to get some sleep on their first night, being rudely awakened by 2 swearing Englishmen who've no idea.
Classic Brits abroad.
Yeah, literally. Sound like a stag do coming up the wall. So we eventually got to El Cap Tower, and got some sleep on there. I mean, went to bed at 3:30 to be woken up at 6 a.m. by a base jumper who jumped off the top. So that was us, 2.5 hours sleep after the first full day, and totally knackered as well. Tom, I'll let you go into day 2.
So it didn't really get any easier. Day 2 was the big day. We were going from that first camp up to camp 5. So it was a good 2,000 foot pretty much, just straight up. And there were moments on it. It's so funny, when you look back on it now, as James was saying that, you just get these flashbacks of little moments. And, in the day, it's great, you can see everything. But what we hadn't anticipated was how much we were going to climb at night, just because we were moving so slowly. And day 2, again, we were like, right, camp 5, we'll get there probably just as the sun's going down. And again, the bag got stuck, the ropes got tangled, this happened. And this stuff just doesn't take 10 minutes to kind of solve. It takes an hour and a half. And it added up and added up. And I remember the sun went down. And again, like the row, climbing is a very solitary experience, big wall climbing, because one of you's belaying or doing the bag, one of you's climbing up ahead. So, my camera's gone off. Yeah.
It's lovely for the recording.
Just switch. So one of you is climbing ahead, one of you is on the belay, and there's moments where I remember sitting on my own on the ledge for up to an hour in the darkness, just thinking, what the hell are we doing here? This is just mad. And the grandness of the thing weighs down on you, and then you go and you're like, right, actually we're lucky to be here, we're okay to be here, we're doing well. But again, we got to about 3 a.m. I asked James for the time, and I presumed it was about 10 or 11, and he was like, mate, it's 3 a.m. I was like, okay, we could barely speak at this point. We were so knackered, and it's like, right, we're still 120 feet below the camp we need to get at. We're going to need to stop at the camp before. Got there, it was full. So we basically had an emergency bivvy stop on this tiny, I only can describe it as it's about a foot wide, this ledge. And we shuffled onto it. Our feet dangled over the edge, and it was 2,000 feet straight down, but it was pitch black, so you couldn't see. Sit on there, attach ourselves to the wall. It's like, okay, we're safe. I had a bit of slack in my rope. So James is like, mate, take that slack in, make sure you're okay, because, we're nodding off, and you're literally going to fall off this ledge. So I'm there like, there's loads of slack in this rope, letting it, kind of trying to bring it in. I was like, all right, I'm pretty sure that's fine. Anyway, wake up. Don't really wake up, get about 30 minutes sleep. Sat there just like, oh my God. James is nodding off, and I'm like, I'm not letting him go to sleep. So I was like, oh mate, look at that star. And he's like, for Christ's sake. And sun comes up, and suddenly you realise where you are, the exposure comes back in, and I move around, and I suddenly realise I'm sat on a coil of about 40 feet of rope. And this shows how your decision making gets affected by fatigue and tiredness and stuff. Because when I thought I was actually tightening my rope and taking the slack in, I was just feeding it out. So I was sat on 40 feet of rope that if I'd fallen off, I was absolutely gooing. Like, I'm taking the world's biggest swing and probably breaking like every bone in my body.
That made my morning, that one. And
I know, you
realise that is.
But like, how, like, in that moment of just, like, do you laugh about that? Do you kind
of course. Yeah. It was hilarious. It was one of those moments. It's like, oh my god. But
obviously, it wouldn't be funny if something went wrong. But...
No, but I suppose when you're in that extreme context, it's one of these ones where you probably, if you don't laugh about it, then it just that whole weight of.
We have to laugh about every almost life-threatening situation. We end up laughing at because like you said, it's laugh or cry, and you have to look at it light-hearted because it could have been a lot of the time when we're laughing at these situations. Another one happens, the day after or a week later or whatever it is. And it's the only way to respond in kind of armour. Obviously, you take on board what we've done and it's a big enough deal to not do it again and like learn from it. As long as we're not like laughing it off, forgetting all about it, but it's like, holy shit, that's ridiculous. And finding the whole thing funny.
So you get there and so you've done that, you've had those experiences and you get to the top of El Cap. So if you compare, as you said, when you came into the harbour in Barbados and you get on the jetty with your mums and it was this amazing, amazing moment. Your mums, I'm assuming, weren't at the top of El Cap when you got there. So
No.
Just no champagne. But what was that? Was it the same level of kind of elation or was it different because it was a different process of getting there?
I don't think it was. I think a couple of things probably why. Again, we wanted to get there for the sunset, to watch the sunset on the top of El Cap. Obviously missed it, so arrived at the summit.
It's on theme to your adventures, isn't it?
Man. in the pitch black we arrived. Yeah. So we could have been standing in a car park and it would have looked the same. We literally couldn't see anything.
Yeah, really selling the experience.
Yeah, so there was a sense of achievement. We were so just blasted, so fatigued. There was a sense of achievement. There was a massive sense of relief, but it was very short-lived because something stupid like 90% or 80% of the people that die on El Cap die on the descent down.
Right.
And that's just because you like us, you get to the top, you're shattered, your decision making is terrible, and to get down El Cap is it's not challenging, but it's by no means safe. You wouldn't send even an experienced hiker without any ropes, whether you wouldn't send them up or down even the backside of El Cap. So I think that was in the back of our head that the descent was sketchy, and we still had that to go. It's a 3-hour descent. You have to walk down the east ledges of El Capitan, about 10-15 feet away from the sheer rock face.
Wow.
And it's greasy, it's dusty. Tommy slipped over on that rock, and if you roll one too many times, that's how it happens to people. And then you have to abseil down about 700 feet. So again, when you've just done it, you're knackered, you still got to clip yourself in and be able to consciously abseil down. And again, that's what gets people is they think they're clipped into the right end of the rope and they'll go off the end of the rope or whatever it is. So it still requires a huge level of focus. So it didn't feel like we could relax until we actually got down to the bottom. And then I think only the day after, probably when we had that sleep, it was like, then you get this kind of wave of relief and can't believe we did that, was insane sort of thing. But totally different feeling to that, the moment we'd anticipated on the Atlantic of rowing into the harbour and everyone being there. It was almost the exact opposite of that. No one else there, pitch black, still got work to do, and then looking back, it's like, okay, you're right, yeah, that was incredible.
I can imagine once you get back down the bottom and then you look back at it. So I suppose the Atlantic, you can kind of look out to the horizon, but you can't see how far. Whereas and it's a very visual. We literally just climbed that whole thing. And when you're at the bottom, Tommy, that must be a huge sense of. I suppose you say the top's almost maybe an element of relief. When you get back down, that must be just like accomplishment.
It was mad, because you know, we'd spent so long in the valley beforehand, and most nights we'd go park the van up and we'd go and take a couple of camping chairs and we'd sit there and we'd have a couple of beers and eat our food, just looking up at the rock at night. And at night, when the sun goes down, all these little headlamps come on El Cap, and you can literally see they're like little fireflies of people climbing. Yeah. And we just couldn't relate to it. We're like, why are they climbing at night? Now we know. Like, we'll never do that. Like, it just scares the hell out of us. And what was really interesting was now, well, the last pitch of El Cap, you basically, you know, James went up, our camera team went up, and I was the last person to come up. I ascended this rope, and the rope was hanging about 15 feet away from the wall. Okay. You're 3,000 feet up, and you're dangling and you're spinning, and like everything is below you. And suddenly I had my head torch on, and we knew our family and friends were in the valley watching us. And it was this moment of just like, we are now those headlamps. Like, we are now those people. There's people in the valley looking up being like, how the hell are they doing that? And it was such an amazing moment. Like, couldn't see a lot because it's pitch black. Was still shitting my pants because I was dangling 3,000 feet. But it was just like the culmination of those 18 months. And finally being there on that last pitch was just like, whoa, this huge wave of just relief and emotion. And, you know, it was the days after we went to LA and like celebrating. I don't think I've ever been just so happy just to not have this thing lingering over us. And it was just this, just the shape we were in was embarrassing. Like, I had a severe limp for 2 weeks. Like, we could barely walk. Our hands were so messed up just because it shows how desperate the whole thing was. But it was just,
I think it's quite funny how, like, even on those 3 days, you know, that climbing at night and being up there had began to become normal. It was now like, you know, we got down there, and I know Tommy's girlfriend was, she came over to watch us kind of climb it. And when she saw the wall, she was like overwhelmed, right, by how big it was. And how...
I thought she was joking, so I took the mick out of her. She got really angry. She's like, no, I had a genuine panic attack. I've never happened in my life. It was like, oh, sorry. Sorry
at least you know she likes you.
Yeah.
and that was it. Like, but and we got down, and that's kind of what they kept saying was, you know, I can't believe that you were those head towards, just what we've been saying about other people before. And we were like, well, yeah, you know, of course we were. That was like, oh, yeah, that's nothing. Don't worry about it.
But it is like, I suppose like anything, when you've done it, because you've done it, you don't necessarily see it the same way that people that have never even gone near anything like it see it. So even in this conversation, obviously we've spoken numerous times before, but it always amazes me, the journey you go through to purposely pick something you've never done, then pick the most extreme way of learning it and then doing it. Like, it's an incredible thing to do. And obviously you've done 4 amazing adventures now. And before we kind of round off, I suppose the obvious question is, what's the next? Is there any plans for another one soon? Have you got anything you're allowed to say in terms of, thoughts or what's a skill or something you've never done that you'd like to go, actually, that would be a cool thing to try out?
There's a couple of ideas. We haven't landed on it yet, to be perfectly honest. I think it's actually been really, really tough, this next one, because I think everyone, so far, there's almost been this like progression, like it's almost like one-upmanship on the next one. The next one has got to be bigger and more dangerous. And I don't think we will get any bigger and more dangerous than El Cap. Again, we want to do something totally new, but when COVID hit, so the way we kind of plan our adventures, obviously we have to come up with an idea that we both love. When we tell people about it, there's got to be the right reaction. It's got to be like, whoa, like that sounds epic. And thirdly, there's got to be some commercial value to it to bring brands on. There has to be a story. It can't just be, let's go do Everest, because no one's going to pay for us to do that, because it's, it's been done so many times, same with the poles. So there has to be a commercial angle for us to be able to raise the money to do it. So it's a bit of a trifecta in deciding what we do. And obviously since COVID's hit, when we've gone out to brands pitching a few ideas, those conversations have just stopped because marketing budgets are gone, travel is gone. So we're kind of in this weird limbo at the moment where we've got 2 or 3 ideas that we are kind of fleshing out. But we want to bring in a bit more of a narrative around, I think we became fascinated during the climbing journey just about the mindset of these people that do this. So we want to kind of bring more of that story into it, about learning from those people and putting more of the emphasis on, you know, how they operate, rather than it just being about, you know, these 2 Brits scaring themselves and managing to get up something or across something. So it's in process. We haven't landed on it yet, but hopefully we will do in the next couple of months.
Cool. Well, it's really interesting to say that, because it's obviously with what the reason we're talking to you guys and with what we're doing 100 First, you know, it's the power of learning from other people, isn't it? Other people's experiences, their stories, and then how you can draw from them and put it into your context. As we said right at the start, you know, whether people have been super successful, dealt with adversity, whatever it might be, the fundamental principles behind why they've done it are actually the same. The difference is usually just the context in which it's applied. So to round off then, with that in mind, obviously you do a lot of, obviously you go and talk to people and you kind of tell them your stories. What would you say, and as an amalgam, again, it's quite a big question, but as an amalgamation of all the things you've done, what would you say are the really transferable bits that you've experienced on Atlantic, El Capitan, Sahara, in Patagonia, the really transferable bits that are very easy to bring in, so people that are watching this can already start to go, okay, well, that makes sense, I can see how that works?
Yeah, I think we kind of have a key mission of ours, and something that we like actively try to do when it comes to not just adventures, but in our day-to-day life. And something is simple, or sounds really simple, and it's essentially removing the word can't. We think it's the most toxic word in the English language. You know, it stops all sorts of progress and creativity, kind of in whatever you do. And it sounds, you know, incredibly simple, and it is. It's actually quite hard to do, because when you start looking out for it, you realise kind of can't is everywhere. You know, we can't do it this way. It's never been done that way before. You know, you can't climb. What makes you think you can go up El Cap? All that sort of stuff. And just by starting the process of removing can't initially, it means that you open doors that you never would normally do, and you see opportunities that you maybe would never normally see. And that's, I think, the overarching thing for us in terms of our mission, and something that we want people to take from any conversation or kind of session that they have with us. Apart from that, I think controlling the controllables is a big one that, again, falls into our everyday business, as well as our adventure life.
Amazing.
Tommy, you got any to add? A couple to add?
I think one that is actually relevant for when we actually started the business and took the risk of leaving our jobs, and also is very relevant to a lot of the stuff we do on the adventures, is I think a lot of people are very scared to make big, bold decisions and set these big goals, because there's so much unknown. Like, you know, we get asked more than anything, like, oh, I really want to do this adventure, but how do I raise the money? I really want to go full time doing this, but, you know, it's such a big risk. It's to sit down and constantly ask yourself for the decisions, like, what is the worst case scenario? What's the worst thing that can happen here? Usually you'll try and do something, you'll fail, you might look a bit stupid because of it, but the learnings you'll have by failing are just 10 times more than you would by not. And I think that for us, no matter how bad something is, a situation, no matter how badly you've failed or you've slipped up, it may seem like it's the end of the world at the moment, but it is the tiniest little blip, an off note in a kind of an orchestra across your life, which has no real impact. And I think people get so caught up by making the wrong decision at work or at home, or taking a risk, and they build it up and then they're like, oh no, it's not worth it. So just if you want to do it. If it screws up, doesn't matter. Like, you'll laugh about it in 6 months' time or a week's time. I think that's something we learn is no matter how bad it is at that moment, no matter how tired we are or how bad the weather is or how scared we are, you'll be laughing about it in a matter of hours or weeks or months. And I think having that clarity on decision making and risk, is something that will like drastically impact your life. And I think we do what we do to obviously inspire people, but you know, the reason we keep doing new things is, you know, when we're 70 years old, we want to look back and be like, wow, like we've ticked off some really cool stuff, and the memories we have because of that is just so unique. And I think if people take that approach to, doesn't have to be adventure, but just taking risks, it really does, it does push you to achieve some pretty amazing things.
Amazing. 2 brilliant points to finish on. Lads, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out to talk to me today. I think the learnings from what you said are so applicable to everything in every walk of life. So we'll hopefully be doing a lot more work together going forward, which will be amazing. But for now, thank you very much, lads. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, mate.
Cheers.
Looking forward to being involved.
Thanks, man.